and I just felt cold. All I could feel was numbness, the huge light, numbness, and then all of a sudden I looked at myself and I was just laying there in my bed.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Cici. Tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Yeah, you're welcome. A little bit about my childhood. It happened so fast because I was kind of forced to grow up really quick. There was some things that happened in the family, and my mom was in a situation with ICE back in California where she was pretty much taken from us for a few months, that I was kind of put in a position to take care of my little brother and my little sister. My little brother and I are like 11 years apart, and my little sister is like 7 years apart from me. So you could only imagine me being about 13, 14 years old when I had to take care of them. They falsified what had happened. We pretty much picked up like a family member. It was a kid, which made it worse. But they said that he didn't have papers or passport or anything, which was a lie. Was a lie because they eventually let her go. He did have his passport and everything, but for some reason they felt the need to detain her. And I don't know if you've ever gotten into any situation with immigration, but until all the evidence, which is bull, getting a lawyer and everything, they can hold you like against your will, without releasing you. So that's something that my mom actually went through. They detained her purposely for, I want to say, a good 6 months, 5 to 6 months. We almost lost our house. We did lose our car because they kept the car. During that time, I had CPS reach out to me. They had given me food stamps. I don't know what had happened with the mortgage. They were paying it, I believe. I remember that was the very first time they had given me my own food stamp card with my name on it. And then having to register my little brother and my sister and having to walk them to school is just, it was really heavy on me as a teenager. That kind of took a toll on my mental state around that time. And that was when I realized that I wasn't normal, I guess you can say.
Where was your dad in all of this?
My mom and dad separated when I was like about 8 years old. My dad was an alcoholic. He was living in the streets. And at the time we didn't know where he was. All I knew is that he was in Mexicali and somewhere out there. So we weren't really close to my dad after he left. We wouldn't hear from him for months, years. So during that time, it was like non-existent, unfortunately. Even though I did want to reach out, I had tried to reach out to my uncles, but my mom didn't really want us to reach out to anybody because we don't really have any close family. They're all like in Mexico. The ones that are here, obviously, we're not really that close. It's only like 5 of us that we rely on each other. And during that time, it was just 3, me and my sibling. I think the last time we tried looking for him, we kind of just stopped because my dad would hang out in the worst places, like in Spanish, we know them as like los callejones, but the alleys. But you already know the alleys are just nothing full but like drunk people. So my mom ended up getting a call saying that my dad was rushed to the ICU in San Diego because he was stabbed in a fight. He almost died. The dagger missed his heart by like a centimeter. So it like punctured his lungs. And I think that was like the final straw of my mom not pretty much wanting to look for him anymore, because my mom was always the type of mom to never ever separate us from him. But because of how my dad used to be, it was mostly dangerous to be around him than safe. because he was hanging out in the streets. We would just be in the park, out everywhere, and obviously he has 2 daughters and a little boy. That's extremely dangerous in any parent's eyes. So when that happened, that was the last we heard from him. He was released from, it took him about 2 months to recover. And after that, he was released and we didn't hear from him for years. Yeah, pretty much non-existent. School was horrible for me. School was the absolute worst for me. Aside from having to deal with my own personal problems of like bullying, because bullying was like a number one. I'm not going to get too much into that, but bullying was kind of what deteriorated me even more, because it was like I didn't feel safe at school. And it's not that I didn't feel safe at home. I just didn't want to be home because it was too stressful, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I felt safe because there was never really anybody around. At the time, we did have a stepdad, but it took me a while to, even though he was amazing to us, to my mom, my respects, because I can tell he did love us. But for some reason, I just never accepted him. But I guess it was just like that part of me of, like, you're not my dad. Kind of like a rebellious form in my part, so it wasn't mostly him. But I tried to do everything to stay away from home. Like as soon as I would leave my brother, my sister at home. We have an older brother too, but we're not close. So I would just leave him at home with him while I just left. I would skateboard around the city. I would go grocery shopping. I would pretty much act like a mom and a teenager at the same time. Like I would just go home to check on them and then leave. Like I wouldn't stay there. So slowly I started finding peace in the streets, and not in a bad way, as in like drugs or alcohol. Thank God. Thank God. I was always grateful and thankful to say no to the things that were presented to me in that aspect, because all I ever had in the back of my hand was, who's going to take care of my brother, my sister, if something happens to me? And when is my mom going to come home? I guess you can say I didn't really have a safe zone growing up.
Did you know about God?
Definitely did, but I was confused. I was kind of confused just because of all the religion aspects. My mom kind of raised us to, you have to follow the word of God and you have to respect our religion. We were raised Catholic, but Christian at the same time. But we would go to all kinds of churches, but we just, one day to the next, we just kind of stopped. My mom didn't want to do it anymore. And I think it was when all the problems started that she kind of lost faith because of all the things that were happening to us at the time. Living in a small town, it can go one or two ways. It could either be welcoming, because in some churches there was, but in the other, it was nothing but judgment and criticism. So I think that's when my mom stayed away from the church. Once judgment and criticism was like bestowed on our family, that's when like, okay, it's best just to separate yourself. I feel like my adulthood life was more of a hell life than my teenage years. Because I don't want to say that I grew up not knowing love, but I grew up not knowing the proper love. I had no idea what love actually was until I had my son. When I had my son, that was when I knew how screwed up I was. I left California at a really young age, at 17. As soon as I graduated high school, actually. And moving out here, everything happened kind of so fast because I ended up meeting my son's father. We were dating, and then I ended up getting pregnant. So I guess you can say I didn't really explore my options. I didn't get to know. It was like an innocent mind just taking things as it came. And to me, it was normal, obviously, because I was already with him. Like, we were thinking about getting an apartment and everything was going perfectly fine. And when I found out I was pregnant, I was already about 12 weeks in my pregnancy when I found out that he existed. And it was something so beautiful to me, but at the same time, I didn't realize how screwed I was because I wasn't taking care of my son as if he was my son. I was taking care of my son as if he was my brother and my sister. I ended up divorcing his dad because he was such a narcissistic mental abuser. He was not really physical, he was mostly mental. But then when he slowly started getting physical, that was when I knew I had to leave. He slowly would throw things at me, push me, be really aggressive towards me. But then it happened where he slapped me one day. My son was only 3. He was a baby. He was still a baby. He was so small. And it was when I had found out that he was cheating on me. Could have never physically proved it that he was, but I saw all the messages of females and him lying to me that one of them was his cousins. And I found out he was already making plans to go back home in Mexico because I had helped him with this immigration process. So, when that happened, I was just like, my world just came down, it made me feel like I wasn't enough as a woman, as a mom, as a person. I had my full-time job. We would rotate, like he worked in the morning and then I worked at night. So that way we didn't have to leave our son with anyone. It prolonged for a couple months till I finally decided to leave him. My fight or flight mode kicked in again. I had to fend for myself again, but with a child on my back, which made it harder with no family this time. Like no family at all. Again, I almost ended up homeless with him if it weren't for this amazing homeowner. At the time, I knew a friend, 2 friends that were living there. And unfortunately, one of them passed away. So the other one ended up moving out because she had her husband. At the time, she ended up getting married, so she moved out. So he let me rent the home. At the time, it was very, very cheap. I was only paying $500 a month for a home. So he told me, like, I will let you live here rent-free for 2 months so you can collect whatever money you need to get yourself an apartment for your son, because he saw that it was just me and my son. And if it weren't for that, I think my son and I would have been on the streets because I had nowhere else to go. He disappeared when I left them. Like, he disappeared for almost a year.
Why didn't you go back to Cali to your mom?
I don't know. If I didn't really want to separate. At the time, I had it in my head, like, he was too young to separate him from his dad. But then when he disappeared, I was just like, I felt like a failure. I felt like I didn't have a home back in California, even though I knew I could have. I knew, like, no matter how bad of a relationship you have with your parents, like, you already know you will always have a home there. But I don't know if it was just the independency, the hard-headedness, the stubbornness within myself that I just said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go back home and feel like I failed, because I did. I feel like I failed. I'm not going to lie. And so I told myself, like, I'm not going to do that. I want to be able to make it on my own 100% now. And I loved Arizona. I'm not going to lie. California was way too expensive to me because I didn't want to move in with my family. I wanted a place of my own. Now that I have a child, he needed his space, The hardest part was leaving my son, because there were situations where I had people that were taking care of him that I thought were friends, but it just made me realize, like, oh my God, something could have happened to my child. So when I finally found this babysitter, she lived in the same apartment complex that I do. She was an angel. When I tell you, like, she helped me raise my son, it was just such a blessing to have her here, because that was the hardest part. I would drop off my son in the morning to school, and I wouldn't see him until he would either get out and I would just take him food, pick him up and leave him with the babysitter. Or sometimes she would have to pick him up from school and feed him, and I would pay her extra because I wouldn't get home till midnight, 11, 10 p.m. almost every day of the week. Or I would have to leave him with my moms during summer break, vacation, all the vacations, because I was working in the kitchen, so everybody knows, work in the kitchen, you're working holidays. Like, holidays, weekends are like the busiest. So I didn't really get to spend a lot of time with my son. And the little time that we did have together, I would just take him out for a little bit. I was too tired to do anything. I wouldn't really play with him. I don't want to say I was mentally unstable, but I guess you can say I was emotionally unavailable. Every time I met someone, it seemed like they weren't ready, or they used me. I was used. They were married, or they were using me. It made me feel like the only thing that I was good for was sex. I kind of stayed away from men. And obviously, I didn't really feel comfortable having anyone around my son. Like, nobody came around him. There was only one person that did, and I made that mistake. Like, I really made that mistake. Having your own place, as soon as, like, I would tell guys, like, oh, I have my own place or whatever, como que se acomodan, que se conforman. And they kind of want to be taken care of. And when I started to notice that, because they would always try to push that on me, like, oh, when can I come over? Come over, like, let me invite me over, blah, blah. And I'm just like, no, I'm okay. Like, you're okay, I'm okay. And sex wasn't really important to me. Staying single has been an ultimate peace for me, because when I was dating, plus as a single mom, plus juggling work and all this, I'm like, now looking back at that, I realized, like, it took up so much of the person who I was, or who I really am, that I was already neglecting my son as it was, and I couldn't really extend myself to anyone else. So even in that aspect, I was just not available. I guess you can say, like, I was going in the right direction. I was doing school. I was pushing myself. At the same time, I felt like I was a stupid, worthless fool. The religion aspect never really, took into consideration in my life. But it was mostly like he failed me. And he just, I don't want to say he abandoned me, but I guess you can say I felt abandoned in every aspect. Because I questioned myself, like, I wasn't a good mom to my son. Even though I was, like, everybody who surrounded me, everybody who really knew me would tell you, like, I was a great mom, but I didn't see it. I didn't feel it. I felt like I yelled at him too much because I was angry. My state of mind was just always anger, so for a couple years, I was just so mad. I was mad. I was just a rotten person. I guess you could say I didn't want to accept that I was, but I was just living my life, like, showing how rotten I was. Because, you reflect what you are. Broken, alone, hurt, angry. I just didn't want to accept him, or accept the things that was happening to me. I never really felt like things were going to get any better for me. I was always in and out of hospital when I was a little girl. You know how it is when they tell you, you have this, you have that, you got to do this, but you just don't. So it prolonged and it got worse. Plus, I went through something that was medically misdiagnosed, and it led to all the issues that I have now. I was tested because I was at my weakest, I was at my lowest, and I was just ready to let go. But when it was actually happening, that was when I started to pray and I started begging him not to take me yet, because I didn't want to leave my son. But yeah, I was home alone, laying down, and then all of a sudden that was when I felt like I was looking at myself from up above. Like, that's you. That's what you look like. And this is how it's going to be from now on. And it made me realize, like, nobody was going to come find me. At the time, my son was actually with my mom in California. So all I can think of was my body is going to sit here and rot. Like, as messed up as that sound, like, the only thing that I was thinking of, like, oh my God, who's going to find me? Who's going to help me? Who do I call? That was when everything just kicked in immediately. It was almost as if I saw my entire life just, how they say, it flashes right before your eyes. Well, that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me a believer. I didn't believe it. I believe in death. Of course, death is the only thing that's 100% certain in our life. But I didn't believe that it was going to happen to me the way that it did. When you hear all these stories from other people saying, well, yeah, I saw the light. I saw the light too, but it's not really a light. It was just the chemicals in your brain releasing, letting you know that your time is up. And I just felt cold. All I can feel was numbness, the huge light, numbness. And then all of a sudden, I looked at myself and I was just laying there in my bed, peacefully. No pain, no nothing. All I can hear was a ringing. That's the only thing that I heard, was a really, really loud ringing that I couldn't escape from. And then I was trying to scream, but like I couldn't scream. And all I kept doing was yelling at myself in the inside of my head, like, wake up, wake up. This isn't happening. No, it's not happening. And then I started to pray. And then all of a sudden, that was when I came in back into consciousness. I remember begging him. And after that, I came back into a sudden awakening of kind of a voice whispering, get your life together. Get your life together before it's too late. Because the second time, you're not going to have a second chance. When I was doing real estate, we went months without a paycheck. And I was just so dedicated and determined that I ended up meeting this client who, ironically enough, knew someone that I knew from the past. So they were able to get me in contact to this side hustle that I was able to do within a day that gave me a payout of almost $500, which was like a blessing, because coming from someone who didn't have any money to $500 like in a day, that was a huge blessing. And then a funny incident that happened once when I was canvassing at the time, so I was all over Phoenix in the middle of hot summer July. I had no money. I had like $5 for a water. Like, I remember just crying, working. And I was like, I just want to sit down. Like, I'm so tired. I'm so hungry, but I had no money. I had no money. And I was just walking down a main road, like a really busy road. And then I ended up tripping. I ended up tripping, and I was so mad because it was embarrassing. Like, at the time I had like my clipboards, paper, pencil, so everything was all over the floor. It took me a while to pick it up, so I was so mad when I finally got up. Then I went, it was a pebble that had, it was stuck in between, the little crack. So I went back to kick the pebble. And as soon as I kicked it, this, it was windy too. So like it lifted money that was folded. It, it happened out of nowhere that I just started laughing. I started to laugh and I couldn't believe it because I was like, no, I was like, it's probably like just, $5, whatever. I picked it up and it was $200 in like 20 bills, nothing but 20s, but it was worth $200 that were just folded up, stuck in between that little freaking pebble in the crack, that all I can do was just look at the money. I put it in my pocket and I looked up and I just started laughing. I started laughing. I started crying, and all I said was, thank you. Even though I felt like an idiot because my knees were hurting so bad for the fall that I just took, I was able to buy myself a sandwich. I was so broke that I would go days without eating just so my son could have food at home. So when that happened, it was like a blessing. And ever since there, I'm like, okay, little by little, I was starting to accept him back into my life. And that was when things started changing. It didn't change rapidly. I'm not going to lie. It did not. It took a long time. But I remember that was the beginning of new opportunities that were opening and presenting themselves to me. He showed me that the path that I actually wanted to take wasn't the path that I actually needed to take. I was so determined and stuck on doing real estate. I wanted to do business. I really pushed myself. And all I remember when I started the journey, after accepting him back into my life, I started writing. I got back into writing because I was always a writer. But for a long time, I just stopped because that was when all my issues started. I was too depressed to get started again. So when I finally started writing down everything, that was when I started questioning myself. Was real estate what I actually really wanted to do? So, you know how they say, if you're determined, and God will make ways. Well, he did. But I felt like God was telling me, okay, this is the path you want. This is what you want, but you're not being specific with what you want. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw it at you. And he did. He threw the people my way that were opening doors. But things were taken from me as well because I wasn't specific with what I wanted. So during that time, again, I had entered into a new world of hell when it came to business. Because what I actually really wanted to do was make my own business and helping people and becoming a life coach. But I had put that to the side because I needed money. Just like the world, I needed money. So I clinged to the instant gratification of getting the money from real estate when it was not taking me anywhere. I felt like God was testing me all over again, telling me, if this is what you really want, now that I gave you everything that you asked for, now you have to find your own way out. Because I was relying too much on the good luck aspect that was happening to me, that I quickly abandoned the faith and the love that I had at the time with God. And that was when my transmission had blown out and I ended up in the hospital again with a blood clot that almost took my life again. That was when my life was spiraling again out of control. Money was stolen from me. I got kicked out of the real estate firm I was in because they saw that I was trying to get my life insurance license at the time. So I was just hitting rock bottom again. I remember breaking down. I had a very bad meltdown. I don't want to say this aspect of myself, but I was suicidal. So those thoughts started to come back again in my head when I had my meltdown. And all I can remember was, at the time, again, my son wasn't with me. He was in California with my mom. So I felt like the safest thing to do was to take my life. Because I felt like my son was going to be better off with my family, with his dad, with everyone else but me. And I almost did. I almost willingly took my life. But then that was during the time when I had met you, and you and I got closer. And I remember all I can hear was just the words that you were telling me. And you're like, if you don't want to pray about it, just write it down. If you don't want to talk to God, okay, don't talk to him, just write it down for him. I remember you were helping me so much in that aspect that people don't know. Even just like small little words of encouragement is all you really need. Kind words to let you know, like, hey, things are bad, things are bad, but they're not going to stay bad. I was about to take those pills. That was going to be an immediate, like, yeah, you're done. Like, you're done. But I said, no, I refuse to, because I want to help, especially single mothers, because, I can relate to single mothers more. But something within him, I heard, you are a voice, and you need to be that voice for others that are in the same position that you are, because you're not alone. It's easy to tell someone, get over it. It's easy to tell them, be happy. It's easy to say, all of these things. But until you can be relatable and actually know the hell that we endure, that's when your faith is tested with God. Like, if you find that you don't have to be a part of, that's the beautiful aspect too. Like you showed me, you don't have to be part of a religion. He just wants you to get close to him. He will show you. And it's hard because it's easier for us to get caught up in the instant gratification of the numbness. Like me, I never really abused alcohol. I never really liked drinking. But I started smoking weed at 25. That was when my mental issues were spiraling even more. And I noticed that I wasn't smoking for the pain of my body anymore. Now I was smoking to be numb. And I would get high all the time. From sun up to sundown, I would be high. Because I didn't want to feel the pain. I didn't want to hear my thoughts. I didn't want to deal. I just wanted to sit there and just lay on the floor and just cry and hope that when tomorrow comes, everything was going to be within a snap of a finger, normal or happy. But God's like, I gave you the tools. I gave you the people. Now it's your turn, and it's your own strength and determination that's going to get you out of this, because I can't do any more for you. And then that was when I had to kick my own butt into gear. Because it was, like I said, he gave me everything that I asked for. It was crazy. He did. He gave me the money. He gave me the job. He gave me the career. He gave me my purpose. He gave me my purpose. even though I was still lost and confused. Because now I went from, oh, I found myself, but why am I doing this? So it was always a constant circle until I felt this peace that came over me when he's just like, relax. Relax. Just trust me and relax.
I love that. I love the transformation and the woman that you've become because we've been friends for when did we start doing real estate together? Like 3 years ago, I think, 4.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
man,
or
we were so different. We were both just a mess. It's like we both saw each other change and just accept God because we were both going through different things at that time. And it's beautiful to see how much you flourished because you have now peace, that an unexplainable peace that's helping you through it all, and that's through God.
yeah.
So, Cece, what advice could you give people or women or even single dads that may be listening to this that are going through like similar things as you?
Um, accept your situation. Accept that in that moment, God is with you, even if you feel absolutely broken to your core, which is fine. You can be broken. It doesn't mean that you're dead. It just means that the pieces of you have to get back together slowly, but eventually, in God's eyes, you're perfect and you're gonna get there. You just can't give up.
Cece, who is Jesus to you?
He's my friend. He's my dad. He's this love that can't be replaced. Like at first I was just so caught up in the money, in the materialistic piece, as in like the drug usage. For me it was the drugs, the cannabis, the weed. That was like my love, my everything. But when I became sober, because I stopped abusing cannabis, I started to feel his actual love and peace. And it made me realize that that was what I needed. It was a different type of love and peace. And it was the only one that I can get. I couldn't get that from a human. I couldn't get that from myself. But I could get that from God that made me accept it within myself. That's the plan. That's the goal. Slowly, maturely, he's opened up new paths for me. And that's the blessing that we need because we're just confused. And it's okay to be confused. It's okay. But we just have to trust him. That's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cece, for sharing. You have yourself a wonderful day. All right,
You
bye.
too. Bye.